Namaskar. Welcome to Hamska Academy. This is Seshu Chira. Today we are going to learn about tribals, Dikus and the Golden Age. So in this chapter, we will be looking at how did the tribal groups live, how did the colonial rule affect the tribal lives, forest laws and their impact, and we'll also have a closer look at the tribal movements, and we'll have a special case study to understand the Birsa Munda movement. So basically in this chapter we are going to look at how were the tribals before the arrival of the Britishers, after the arrival of the Britishers, what are the changes that have come, what are the forest laws that the Britishers have brought, and then how did the tribals resist those movements? Are they successful? Are they able to bring any kind of changes in the policies? We are going to look in this chapter. So the lesson begins with a web of information where it gives us the first paragraph. We can give it as an activity where there is an information about Birsa who is found roaming, or he is seen moving across in the forest of Chota Nagpur region, which is in Jharkhand state. He was born in the tribal family of Mundas who used to live in the Chota Nagpur Plateau region, and it is believed that he has lot of miraculous powers so that he can cure people with the diseases. He also believed that he is born to free the people from slavery, and people went on to an extent to believe Birsa as God, as Bhagavan, because he has miraculous powers. There were also other tribals living in that region. Those are Santals and Orans. So the problems they were facing under the British rule. So basically the chapter begins with some piece of information floating about Birsa, telling him how the people used to feel about him, what are the thoughts of the people about Birsa Munda. He was born in a tribal community. He was considered as God. Some people used to believe that he is having miraculous powers. He can cure any kind of diseases. At the same time, there were other tribal groups were also living in that region. Those are Santals and Orans. So basically, the lesson starts with giving some piece of information where you get some sort of idea how the tribal people used to think. What are the thoughts of the tribal people about their leader? How he is treated? What are the famous or few tribal groups that are living in Chota Nagpur Plateau region, by whom or who is giving them problems or troubles? All these aspects are given in a small gist in the first part of the lesson. Let's now get into the details. Their familiar ways of life seem to be disappearing. Now, what is the main thing that is bothering the tribal communities? The main thing that is bothering the tribal communities is that their way of life, their livelihoods are being disappearing. They were under threat, and they were also feeling that their religion is in danger. So why did the tribal people feel like that? Why they want to believe their leader as God? What made them to get angry against the Britishers? We are going to look at in the chapter in detail. Follow. How did the tribal groups live? By the 19th century, the tribal people in different parts of the country, especially in India, were involved in variety of activities. They used to do different kinds of occupations or cultivations also in different ways. Their cultivation style itself is different. Very few are in the settled way of cultivation. So how did the tribals live can be broadly categorized into 4 groups. That is, some were practicing Zum cultivation, some were practicing the lifestyle of hunters and gatherers, while some herded the animals, while some took to settled cultivation. So how did the tribal groups live? They used to live by doing 4 different ways of cultivations or their livelihoods. One is Zum cultivation. Some lived the life of hunting the animals and gathering the food. Some took to herd animals, like animal herding or taking care of animals, sheep, goat, and some took to settled cultivation. Let us learn about Zum cultivation, or the other name for Zum cultivation is shifting cultivation. What is shifting cultivation? The shifting cultivation or Zum cultivation means that a cultivator selects a piece of land, cuts the tree tops and allow the sunlight to reach the ground and burn the vegetation on the land to clear it for cultivation. He selects a piece of land and cuts the trees over that on that place of a land, and he burns all the trees and make it crystal clear. The sun rays falls there, and there the cultivation can be started. They spread the ash from the firing because it contains potash, which will help the soil to get fertilized. So they spread the ash from the firing, which contain the potassium to fertilize the soil. They broadcast the seeds and scatter the seeds in the field instead of plowing the land and sowing the seeds. In Zum cultivation, they don't do plowing of the soil or they don't do sowing of the seeds. They just scatter the seeds and throw them on the soil. After harvesting of the crop on one field, they move to another field. After cultivating the crop in a piece of land, they leave that one and they move to another one. Like that, they keep on traveling after cultivation. That's why it is known as shifting cultivation. These cultivators were found in the hilly and the forest tract of northeast and central India. So basically, the shifting cultivation means they select a piece of land, clear the trees from that land, allow the sunlight to fall, they burn the cut down trees and make the ash go inside because it contains potassium, so it can help the soil to get fertilized, and they broadcast the seeds. They don't do plowing or they don't do sowing of the seeds here. Once the harvesting is done on the one field, they leave that place and go to another place, leaving that place empty for years. These type of cultivators are found in the hilly and the forest tracts of northeast and central India. This is one thing what the tribals used to do for living. The second living style of tribals is hunters and gatherers. Many tribal groups, they used to live by hunting animals or gather the forest produce. They used to gather the fruits, they used to gather the things whatever they get from the forest, and they used to survive on that. Which are the communities were famous in this kind of lifestyle? The Gonds of one such community who lived in the forests of Orissa. They ate the fruits and the roots which are collected from the forest, cooked with the food. They cooked their food with the oils that they extracted from the seeds of sal and mahua. They also used many forest shrubs and herbs for medicinal purposes. They sold forest produce in the local markets. So the tribal groups, the the second major lifestyle what they used to live is hunting and gathering. Especially the Gonds or the Gonds of the tribal community Gonds used to live in the forest region of Orissa, used to eat fruits, roots collected the forest produce. They also used to extract oil from the seeds of sal and mahua. They also have knowledge about the forest shrubs and herbs for the medicinal purposes. They used to sell them in the local markets or in the regional areas. Now the tribal groups often used to buy and sell what they are able to get from the goods in the forest and get it from the nearest locality, because not everything is available in the forest. This is the way that they have get in touch with the traders and money lenders. The traders and money lenders come around with things for sale and sold them with high prices to our tribal communities. And also money lenders come into the picture here because they used to give them loan to meet their cash needs at very high rate of interest, and loans were usually charged with very high rate of interest, so they could not pay it back. Because they are getting in touch with the traders and the money lenders, the tribals were getting into the trap of debt and poverty. That is the reason why they used to call the traders and money lenders as evil outsiders, or the reason for the misery. They are the cause, they are the reason for their misery, or to get into the debt trap and poverty. Third way of living of the tribals was they used to herd the animals and rear the animals. The one Gujars of the Punjab hills, the Lambadis of Andhra Pradesh used to do cattle herders, where the Gadis and Kulu were shepherds. They used to herd the shepherds, and the Bakarwalas of Kashmir used to rear goats. So they used to do animal herding, cattle rearing. And coming to the last one, very few switched to settled cultivation. By 19th century, many from in the tribal groups began to settle down at a particular place and started to do cultivation in one place after year, instead of moving from one place to another. If you remember properly, these people have a habit of moving from one place to another place, but here they started to settle down at a particular place. As the years passed by also, they started to live in the same region. They began to use plow and gradually got the rights over the land. So in the shifting cultivation, they never used to have the habit of using a plow or sowing a seed. When it comes to the Mundas of the Chota Nagpur region, the land belonged to the clan as a whole. So the tribal community named Mundas living in the Chota Nagpur Plateau region used to have the entire land as a community land. So all of them had rights on the land. Now the point here is, it is not an individual property, it is the group property. So the community property. But some people within the clan acquired more power than others. They are called as chiefs, and others are followers. Though the land belongs to the entire community, their particular leader or the chief used to have hold on the entire land. The others were called as followers. The British officials saw the settled tribal groups, the groups who practiced settled cultivation like the Gonds, Santals, Mundas, as more civilized than hunter-gatherers or shifting cultivators. Now, among all the other occupations or livelihoods which are done by the tribal groups, the Britishers used to feel that the tribals like Gonds and Santals, Mundas, who are practicing the settled cultivation, means doing cultivation at one particular place year after year are considered as more civilized tribal communities when compared to the other communities, because they are not settling at a particular place and it's very difficult for the Britishers to track them. They used to move from one place to another place in shifting cultivation. As hunters and gatherers, they never used to come out of the forest regions. So it's very difficult for them to catch hold of them or find out about them. So they used to feel out of the tribal groups, the groups which are already settled or doing settled cultivation are more civilized than other tribal groups. So these are the four major lifestyles of the tribal groups. What happened to the tribal chiefs? Before the arrival of the Britishers, in the areas where we have the tribal chiefs, or who's the owner of the entire land of the tribal community, as we discussed in the previous slide, they used to have enormous economic power and had the right to administer and control the territories. Nobody used to say a word literally against them. They used to follow the instructions given by the tribals. But under the Britishers' rule, the functions and the powers of the tribals chiefs changed largely. They were allowed to keep their titles, and they were also allowed to collect rents of the lands which they have owned or have under their control, but they lost the administrative power. They were forced to follow the laws which are made by the Britishers. They are also expected to have a discipline in their tribal groups which is expected from the Britishers. So the tribal chiefs are having the titles, are having the authority to collect the rent, but they don't have the economic power, the right to administer, the right to control their territories, which they used to have before the arrival of the Britishers. They lost all their powers. They had only titles and they can collect little bit rent. And they were also expected to discipline their own tribal groups on behalf of the Britishers, which means the Britishers used to command them, these people used to follow them. That became the status of the tribal chiefs. How did they affect the lives? What happened to the shifting cultivators? The British wanted all the tribal groups to settle down and become peasant cultivators. Why did the British want this one? The British wanted this because if the tribal groups settle down in a particular place, that will generate them a regular source of revenue for them. If the tribal groups are following hunting and gathering lifestyle, or they are practicing shifting cultivation from one place to another, and also if they are having animal herding and moving from one place to another place based on the seasonal requirements, because the cattle has to be fed, that will not generate a regular revenue source for the Britishers. That is the reason why the Britishers wanted the tribal groups to settle down, and that can generate a regular source of income for the state. The Britishers went ahead and introduced land settlement. They measured the land, defined the rights, and tax is fixed so that the Britishers get revenue. Some peasants are declared as owners of the land, which means they will collect the rent from the tenants and they will pay it to the Britishers. The British effort to settle some cultivators or shifting cultivators at a particular place was not successful. See, basically, the tribals used to do this kind of cultivation because the soil fertility was less. when we were discussing about the Zoom cultivation, we mentioned very clearly that the soil is not having proper fertility. So we are making the ash which contains potash will go into the deeper layers, and we are leaving it for some time, and then we come back. That's how they used to do. And the water availability also is very less. The water is scarce. In that areas, if you expect the tribals to settle down and do plow cultivation, it is not an easy job. And basically the soil is not so fertile, water is scarce, soil is dry. So that made the Zoom cultivators and the tribals to protest against the British ideas or laws. The British had to ultimately allow the tribals to carry on the shifting cultivation in some parts of the forest, because there is no other alternative and they have to face widespread protest. So here the Britishers tried to settle down all the tribals and ask them to take peasant cultivation or settled cultivation, so that the Britishers can have the regular source of revenue for them. They have measured the lands and they have made certain people as the owners and fixed the tax, and they made the others as tenants, means we have to pay the rent for them. But the efforts of the Britishers to settle down the Zoom cultivators at one place was not very successful. They could not settle down the people due to various reasons like scarcity of water, soil is dry, fertility levels of the soils are less, and plow cultivation is not so easy. They have to face widespread protests. So the Britishers, having no other alternative, ultimately allowed the shifting cultivation to happen in some parts of the forest. So the status of the shifting cultivators, the tribal chiefs, you can have a glance at here. So this is a concept map which can show you how they were there before the Britishers have come, what happened to them after the Britishers have come. In one sentence, we can put it as the authority of the tribals, chiefs especially, has significantly reduced under the colonial rule. The forest laws and their impact on the tribal societies. Now, what are the forest laws? What is the impact of the forest laws on the tribal societies? The forest laws classified, divided the forest into reserved forest, where they produce timber, which is costly and needed. So in these areas, in these forests, people were not allowed to move freely or practice Zoom cultivation or collect the fruits and hunt the animals. So basically the forest, the reserved forest, in the sense they blocked all the ways for the tribals to enter into the forest. They were not allowed to move freely, practice Zoom cultivation, collect the fruits or hunt animals. Many shifting cultivators were therefore forced to move out from that particular area, and they were in search of work and livelihood. So because many people are moving out of this area, the Britishers had to face a problem of laborers. As many shifting cultivators are moving out of the forest, that brought a problem for the Britishers, as there are no laborers found to cut the trees for the railway sleepers and to transport. So the Britishers have decided that they would give Zoom cultivation or Zoom cultivators small patches of land in the forest and allow them to cultivate. Oh wow, that's a great step. But they have to live in the village and they have to provide labor support to the forest department and look after the forest. This is the condition which is kept by the Britishers. So that's how the Britishers tried to sort out this particular problem. But many tribal groups did not agree for this. They rose in open rebellion. One of the such event was Songram Sangam in 1906 in Assam, the forest satyagraha in 1930 in the central provinces. So the forest laws had a deep impact on the lives of the tribal groups. During the 19th century, the traders and the money lenders started coming in often into the forest to buy the forest produced goods. In order to get the tribals, asking them to get the forest goods, the money lenders used to offer cash loans to them and asking them to work for low wages. So Hazaribagh was an area where the Santals reared cocoons. The traders used to come who are dealing with the silk sent their agents to give loans to the tribals and collect the cocoons. These cocoons were then exported to Gaya, where they were sold at 5 times the price. The middlemen who arranged the deals between the exporters and the silk growers made huge profits. The silk growers earned very little. So during the 19th century, the traders and the money lenders used to make a lot of money because they used to exploit the innocent tribal groups in that area. One such example, the cocoon or the silk growers used to grow in the Hazaribagh. The Santals used to rear the cocoons. The traders used to send their agents, give them loans, tribals, and collect the cocoons. And these were exported to Gaya, where they used to sell them at many fold times the cost, and they used to earn huge profits. So the middlemen used to earn huge profit. The silk growers earned very little. That's how the interactions with the traders and the money lenders were there. So the conditions of the tribals became worst. They had to go far away from their homes in search of work, and the work was even worse. The situations became worst. From the late 19th century, tea plantations started to come up and mining became an important industry. The tribals were recruited in large numbers to work in the tea plantations of Assam and the coal mines of Jharkhand, and were paid miserably low wages and prevented them from returning. So the tribals who were upset with the laws or who were forced to leave their basic livelihood professions or jobs, what they were doing, collecting, hunting animals, or going and doing shifting cultivation, were forced to leave the forest due to the British laws, went on in search of work, where they were recruited into the tea plantations which came up in the late 19th century, and also in the mining industries. They were paid very little wages and they were prevented from returning back to homes. Let us have a closer look at the tribal movements, and then we will look at Birsa Munda movement. So it was during the 19th and the 20th centuries, the tribal groups in different parts of the country rebelled against the change in the laws, the restrictions on their practices, the new taxations they had to pay, and the exploitations by the traders and money lenders. So here is a list how and when the tribals have rebelled. The Kol tribal group rebelled in 1831. I think this is the first one. 1831 to 1832. The Santals rose in revolt in 1855. The Bastar rebellion took place in central India in 1910. Worli revolt in Maharashtra in 1940, and then the Birsa movement in 1895. Let us look at the Birsa movement. Birsa Munda was born in 1870s, mid 1870s. He was the son of a poor father who grew up around the forests of Bahonda while grazing sheep, playing the flute, dancing in the local akhara. So Birsa Munda belongs to basically a poor family. His father used to be a cattle rearing or animal herding is his livelihood. So Birsa Munda was grown up moving around the forest, grazing sheep, playing flute and dancing in the local akharas. Birsa movement aimed at reforming the tribal societies. Birsa Munda basically was influenced by many kinds of thoughts because for some time he attended a Christian missionary school. So he learned there that cleanliness is very, very important. So he wanted to reform his own tribal society. He argued that the Mundas, the tribal group, has to give up the habit of drinking liquor. Consuming liquor even today is considered as a bad habit. It has many adverse effects on that. Similarly, we want the village to be clean. Now also we started the movement of Swachh Bharat, where we want everything to be clean and green. So similar kind of movement, he want the Mundas to live in clean areas so that they don't get affected by any kind of diseases which were spread in the villages. And he also want to give up the habit of witchcrafting and sorcery. Like in simple words, we can say black magic powers, where they used to believe that if you offer someone's life, if you kill somebody and offer to god or goddesses, you might get some kind of magical powers or something like that. Superstitious beliefs which he want the Mundas to give up. So basically he want to reform the tribal society from all kinds of bad habits in simple and straight words, like drinking liquor, give up the habit of liquor, clean their village, keep it clean, and give up the habit of superstitious beliefs like witchcraft and sorcery. In 1895, Birsa argued his followers to recover their glorious past, when Mundas lived a good life, constructed the embankments, tapped the natural springs, planted trees and orchids, practiced cultivation to earn their living. So Birsa propagated that they had a glorious past. So let us all live in such a way how our ancestors have lived a happy life, a good lifestyle, by constructing embankments, tapping the natural springs, planting trees, planting orchids and earning money through cultivation. So we want them to give up the bad habits, let us say, and also practice good lifestyle which was practiced already by his ancestors. So he want to reform the tribal society, and Birsa was influenced by the sermons of the missionaries. Now what was the reaction of the British? The political aim of the Birsa movement: one, he want to reform his own tribal society, and he want to drive out the missionaries, the money lenders, the Hindu landlords, and he want to set up the Munda Raj with Birsa at its head. So he don't want the Britishers, he don't want the missionaries, he don't want the money lenders, he don't want the Hindu landlords and the governments which are exploiting the innocence of the tribal groups and also causing many miseries to them. So he want to eliminate all of them, and he want to set up Munda Raj with Birsa as its head. So what was the reaction of the Britishers for his political aims? As the movement spread, British officials decided to act. They arrested Birsa Munda in 1895, convicted him on the charges of rioting and jailed him for 2 years. As expected, the Britishers want to suppress the movement, so they arrested him and put him in jail for 2 years on the charges of rioting. Birsa was released in 1897 and he began touring the village to gather support. So his followers attacked police stations, churches, and raided the properties of moneylenders and zamindars. So basically, as we know, that was his political aim. He don't want the missionaries, he don't want the Britishers, he don't want moneylenders, he don't want zamindars, because they are exploiting the innocence of the tribals and causing many problems to them. So his followers attacked the police stations, churches, raided the properties of moneylenders and zamindars. They raised the white flags as a symbol of Birsa Raj or Birsa Kingdom. But unfortunately, in 1900, Birsa Munda passed away due to cholera disease and the movement got faded out. As he was arguing, he was telling his own groups to reform, let us have a clean village, where he could not convince them 100%. That's the reason why he was affected by the disease of cholera. Maybe many might have been suffering with the disease. It is because he is the leader of a rebellion movement, so we came to know about this. So what is the significance of the movement? It is forced the colonial governments to introduce the laws so that the tribals could not be easily taken over by the outsiders known as Tikkus. It also showed once again that the tribal people had the capacity to protest against injustice and express their anger against the colonial rule. So the Birsa movement or Birsa might have passed away in 1900, but the impact was still there. The tribals draw the inspiration from there and fought against the Britishers and forced the Britishers to stop their laws on getting implemented on the tribals. So they were able to fight against the colonial rule and change the colonial rules. So in this session, we learned what are the different lifestyles of the tribals, how are they impacted, the tribal chiefs before the arrival of the Britishers, after the arrival of the Britishers, what is the impact of the forest laws on the tribal groups, and what are the different movements that are being led by the tribals at different places. And at the end, we had a case study of Birsa Munda's movement and the importance and significance of Birsa Munda movement. Thank you very much for all of you for watching the video. Please consider subscription and give your valuable comments. Thank you.